Hey, it's Ted from Crafted Solutions. In the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you how to make the most of GitHub's AI assistant, Copilot. We're going to be backfilling tests, refactoring code, and generating new code. So let's get started. So the example I prepared for you today is React's tic-tac-toe tutorial. It's great because it's simple, relatively straightforward, and has no test suite, which is perfect for us to use Gitpilot to backfill those tests. So let's move into our IDE. And here I've got the project already set up. I've made some changes. I've broke out their app.js into two separate files, like you might see in a normal React project. And second, I've added some test infrastructure, which is going to be helpful for running the test suite. Awesome. So we've got two test files to backfill, board.spec.js and square.spec.js. So we're going to fill them in two different ways. The first thing that we're going to do is use Copilot's code generation. And what we need to do first is give Copilot some context as to what we want to do in this file. So we're going to say that this is a test file for the board component. It already has an idea of what we're trying to do. So yeah, just like that, we're going to take some of its suggestions. And then on top of that, I'm going to add some individual style. So I prefer to use describe, expect, it from just because I know that's how I'm used to seeing tests. So given that, Copilot's already using the imports in this file to describe board, and that's exactly what I want to set up. It renders a 3x3 grid of squares. Okay, I'll take this, but this isn't actually what the test is doing. So I'm going to make a quick adjustment. It renders nine squares. Often I find myself taking a lot of Copilot suggestions and then just pruning back. So I actually think that this is a good test or a good expectation to toss in the previous test. And then we can throw this entire thing kind of into the garbage. And then I'm not sure if you're getting a feeling, but Copilot is thinking very, very quickly. One thing I highly recommend when working with Copilot is being able to turn it off so you can actually get a thought out. So it renders three groups of three. All right. And then I'm going to turn it back on. Perfect. And so that seems like a pretty good test. Looking at it, my square doesn't have the dot square selector. And I think I'm okay with it just assessing or just expecting that each group will have three children. I don't necessarily need to know exactly what they are or specify in that. So yeah, let's run this test suite. We failed to run. Oh, that is also something that we have to be careful with Copilot. It always forgets that closing parenthesis. Great. So that's working. Now let's go to Square, and we're going to approach this entirely differently. Well, not entirely differently. We'll use the Copilot chat this time. I actually already have a prompt written on the side, so I'll toss that in. And this is a conversation just like ChatGPT, where you can just tell it what you want in plain English, and it'll spit back out, it'll either answer your question or give you code. But the coolest part about that is that it references your code while making the suggestion. So here's a basic test suite. All right, well, let's just copy this into the file and see how we like it. All right, so describe square, it renders a square. The name is a little bit off. It renders a square with no text. Great. And then it updates square value to X. Oop, when clicked. All right, so now we can run the whole test suite together. And we have a full working suite in maybe less than a few minutes, which is fantastic. All right, so let's move on and do a refactor. The next step is actually the next step in the tic-tac-toe tutorial is actually to lift up state from square to board, which is an interesting refactor because none of the app functionality changes, but the implementation does. At Crafted Solutions, we love to practice test-driven development. So let's try to do that with this refactor. We are going to first start a new conversation in the Copilot. Starting a new conversation kind of clears the context a little bit and makes hallucination from Copilot a little bit less likely. I don't think that would have happened in the last conversation, but it's always a healthy practice or a healthy habit to get in the practice of. All right, I'm going to give it my prepared request. My request is pretty simple. I'm letting it know what I'm doing. I'm lifting up state from square to board. I'd like to do the test files first, and then I'm requesting that it refactor both test files accordingly. And it should do that for me. So here is the new square.spec. So I'll just paste that in and take a look at it there. It's rendering a square with no text. Fantastic. And it calls on clicked when clicked. That's fantastic. It's taking a null value as the original value, which is perfect. Cool. So that was very easy. Let's do the same thing with board. All right, so the first thing is that it renders 9 squares. That didn't need to change. It updates the square value to X when a square is clicked. Great. It, interestingly enough, got rid of the 3x3 test that we had. So instead of getting rid of everything, let's just take this new test and paste it in. So we're expecting that it renders 9 squares, which kind of feels redundant giving the second test, so we can get rid of that. It renders 3 groups of 3 squares, and it updates the value to X, the square value to X when a square is clicked. Great. I think we will need to import that. Cool. And let's run our test suite. Perfect. So the interesting part about this refactor is that actually only one test suite will pass and the other will fail. So let's address the failing test first. And I could go in and rewrite the code, but given that this is showing you how to get the most from Copilot, I'm going to ask Copilot to do it. So I'm going to say update square.js so that it passes all the tests. Yeah, that easy. We can save that, rerun the tests. And interestingly enough, now all of Square's tests pass, but board fails because it was relying on state being in Square. So let's go over to board and pass it the same prompt. All right. So I like that it has state up here. So let's add that. We also need some imports from React. Cool. And then in here, I feel like it could do better. It's it technically it's right, but it just looks it's confusing. It's not very readable. So let's say, can you import? But that's the nice part about Copilot is that it can be a constant conversation between you and the AI assistant. And hopefully, yeah, um, it was responsive. So you can see that it's helpful. Um, and it's aware of the conversational context, which is very nice. And the last piece that we could do is looking at this repetition. We could say, um, can you refactor e all to square? Do I So I'm just asking it to use a helper function to get rid of some of this repetition in there. And perfect. Yep. It is giving me a function render squared, which I am going to copy exactly into this file. Great. I'll run my test suite and we're all passed. That's all I have prepared for today. We watched GitHub's Copilot assistant backfill tests, help us refactor code and generate new code. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned for more.